Does everybody like the press?
They can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news. It wasn't until I became a politician that I realized how nasty, how mean, how vicious, and how fake the press can be.
I guess the best way to put it is that I am easily distracted. I like to think of it this way. Sherlock Holmes once said, you pull on a thread and you keep pulling wherever it leads you. And kind of what happened to me this week. I was, as you know, I'm very passionate about the First Amendment, particularly freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. It is, in my view, it's the most important of the rights. I realize that they're all equally important, but in my view, in my world, the First Amendment is the primary one. Without the First Amendment, there's no need for any of the rest of them. That said, as you know this week, if you've been watching the shows this week, I've been very concerned about the attacks on the First Amendment that are more subtle than we normally see. Whether that's the New York Times deciding to op-ed a business out of existence, or the government itself doing some things that seem odd. I had a story today, and this was actually the story that got me started on the whole week, about the supervisors in San Francisco City County. Supervisors there were upset because, well, some of the media they're getting, some of the newspapers in San Francisco are not complimentary of these supervisors. Now, San Francisco is kind of unique, but kind of not. Newspapers used to be the thing in the United States. I don't know if you knew that or not. I'm sure you did. Where I grew up in Denver, we had two newspapers, two main newspapers, and dozens of smaller area-type newspapers. Here in the Puget Sound area, they used to have Seattle PI and the Seattle Times, but there's always these local newspapers that are designed to serve a specific area. And San Francisco is this way. Of course, they have the Chronicle, but then they have, I think I read somewhere it's like 17 or 18 newspapers, periodicals with circulations of anywhere from 7 to 10,000 that directly serve certain areas of San Francisco. And one of these papers has run afoul of the Board of Supervisors there in San Francisco by not being obsequiously complimentary, bowing down to the supervisors and, I don't know, praising them with whatever. This is intriguing because, you know, it's like, well, what did you expect? And at any rate, under law, San Francisco has a law. Your city has the same law, I guarantee it, wherever you live, has the same type of law, that certain notices must be printed in whatever newspapers reach this constituency of that government. Public notices, that sort of thing. And so one of the ways these small newspapers make some money is that they charge, because they can, they charge the governments to publish these public notices. And so these local newspapers in San Francisco have been publishing these things and collecting a few bucks here and there from the city county of San Francisco for publishing them. Well, the supervisors, I guess, last week got upset about this newspaper, this one newspaper that wasn't singing their praises and was being critical of them. And so they have decided, they introduced a law to, how did they put it? Oh yeah, establish journalistic standards before they will allow the city's money to be spent on a newspaper. Now, this is completely illegal. It's completely unconstitutional. There are at least 2 Supreme Court decisions that make that very clear, that no, you cannot do that. What's fascinating to me isn't that they don't already know this, because they do. What's fascinating to me is that they don't care. They're more upset about the fact that Oh my God, these people are criticizing us and not, bowing down to us and not praising us at every moment. And because of that, we're going to put them out of business. Well, that should be problematic. It should be setting off alarm bells in our heads. But it's just one example of this kind of thing going on. And so I was always prepared to talk about that, and I was prepared to go into all that. And I started doing the show prep for it. I started putting this together. Okay, how do I want this weaved in? If you've ever been around me for show prep, you know that it's an entertaining process to watch. I've been told by those who have been a part of it. You never know. Sometimes my mind is going to go, I'll see something, and it'll completely change the direction of something. And that's what happened here. I had this whole thing prepared. We were going to talk about freedom of the press and what it means, starting with Thomas Jefferson. Our liberty depends upon the freedom of press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. I don't think you're going to find anybody that disagrees with that. Okay, maybe a Joseph Goebbels or a communist or something along those lines, but no real American is going to disagree with that, whether they're left, right, center, or indifferent. We all believe that. We all believe that freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion all have a double aspect, a freedom of thought and a freedom of action, we're told. And again, I don't think you're going to find many people that will disagree with that. There is a double action here, this idea of freedom and of action. Felix Frankfurter, the Supreme Court Justice, freedom of speech and of the press are essential to the enlightenment of a free people and in restraining those who wield power. These are fantastic quotes. These are deep, meaningful things that remind us of something that is very precious to us. Even Calvin Coolidge, my personal favorite president, said the freedom of the human mind is recognized in the right to free speech and free press. Calvin Coolidge was, I don't have time to get into all that today, but he's my favorite. For those of you that are looking for a trivia question, Calvin Coolidge, Dave's favorite president. But in the middle of all this, I started to see a pattern that was bothering me. And it was in the back of my head, and it was just going to, you know how that happens. These supervisors deciding that you can't, we're not going to spend taxpayer dollars advertising a legal public notice because we don't like the way that they're saying. We're going to establish journalism. We're all mad about that. Everybody recognizes the danger of that. Everybody sees that and goes, that is the very definition of not just a slippery slope, but a completely collapsed slope that if we head down, there's no coming back from. But as I began to read more about this and think about this, I came across a couple of quotes that, well, started me considering things. George Orwell's freedom of the press, if it means anything at all, means the freedom to criticize and to oppose. Again, I don't think you're going to find anybody that disagrees with that. But it's a kind of uneasy quotation. It's kind of an uneasy thought. Criticism has become, in our modern world, in our modern political existence, criticism has become not a legitimate discussion of things. We no longer criticize people in the sense of, hey, there's a better way to do that. We criticize people to insult them. We criticize people to complain about them. We criticize people to demonize them. We don't criticize them to improve what's going on. It's hard to think of it in those terms, but it's reality. Opposition is important. The basis is for the way we work things. But if all we're doing is criticizing in the sense of tearing down and opposing in the sense of those people are evil, those people are going to destroy everything, only we have the solutions that will work, is that really opposition in the sense of a free press and a free country? Albert Camus, the Nobel laureate from 1957 in literature, is an interesting guy. I've learned a lot about him this week. Said this: freedom of the press is perhaps the freedom that has suffered the most from the gradual degradation of the idea of liberty. if you kind of let that rattle around in your heads for a minute, I don't think, again, particularly those on the right, will disagree much with that. We vehemently believe that freedom of speech is being suppressed everywhere it goes, but I think there's something deeper in what he's saying here. The gradual degradation of the idea of liberty has suffered the most because of freedom of the press. What exactly does he mean by that? Does he mean that the press is, I mean, literally you can go today, in our world today, and read virtually anything you want. There is nothing that stops you from reading anything and everything. Almost nothing is verboten anymore. But we still consider the degradation of our liberty a result of the decline in the freedom of the press. What exactly does he mean by this? In today's world, now maybe 1957 was different, but today's world, it caught me off guard. It really did. In the middle of all this prep about the supervisors and complaining about the supervisors and how dare they decide, how arrogant of them to decide that they don't care about the First Amendment, freedom of press, and they don't care about these precedents from the courts. They don't care about any of that. These people dared to criticize us, and we're going to put a stop to that. We'll show them. There was this thought still percolating in the back of my mind, like my coffee, percolating. Started doing that lately. Thomas Jefferson said, "The press, confined to truth, needs no other legal restraint. The public judgment will correct false reasonings and opinions on a full hearing of all parties, and no other definitive line can be drawn between the inestimable liberty of the press and its demoralizing licentiousness." All of a sudden, there was a realization in my mind about what Albert Camus was actually saying. This degradation of the idea of liberty, suffering because the freedom of the press, has come about not because the press has been outrageously liberal. I mean, some portions of it have, certainly, or overwhelmingly conservative. Some portions of it have been. It's become that way because we, the people, the public judgment, are no longer correcting false reasonings and opinions. We're no longer hearing all parties. We're no longer drawing a line between the inestimable liberty of the press and its demoralizing licentiousness. It's us, people. We're the ones that are causing this degradation. We are the ones who are letting our liberty slip away because we are not holding all media accountable. Were the criticisms and opposition of the newspaper in San Francisco correct? I don't know. If they were, God bless them. If they weren't, shouldn't the 7,500 people who read that paper be telling that paper, hey, you're wrong, and you need to dial it back in to where you're correct. We need to balance this back out. We need to draw the line between demoralizing licentiousness and the liberty of the press and find a way to make sure that we're getting good information. We, the people, are getting good information from you. Otherwise, you're useless as a source, regardless of what the Board of Supervisors says. We accept certain news sources as absolute because we have decided that those news sources are valid. We have decided I like that news, I don't like that news, I do like that news. And it doesn't matter what fool thing they print, what fool thing they say. I used to complain when I was on the radio, one of my most bitter complaints. And I have an author friend who makes the same complaint about another famous author, but I used to complain about stuff. I would say something. I don't know. The sky is blue. And I would say it, and I would say it, and I would say it, and people would call and argue me. They'd send me emails telling me I'm wrong, this, that, and the other. And then Rush Limbaugh would say it, and everybody would go, see, Dave, the sky really is blue. Makes you wonder sometimes. I wonder if we, the people who are supposed to hold the media accountable, have gotten to the point where we are so focused on what our news source we accept is that we're not really paying attention to what it's actually saying. In other words, if two news sources report exactly the same story with exactly the same words, but one source is a source I approve of and one source is a source I don't approve of, do I say that one's fake news and that one's true? That's the point we've actually kind of reached, isn't it? Now, I'm not saying the media isn't biased. I'm not saying newspapers aren't biased. What I'm saying is the readership of those newspapers, the listenership of those businesses, the viewership of those medias aren't holding them accountable. Are you calling them up and saying, that's wrong, that's incorrect? Are we doing that ourselves? Are we making sure, as Jefferson said, that the line between the liberty of the press and its demoralizing licentiousness is maintained? Or do we just accept it because it's a source I like? I was listening a couple of weeks ago to a friend of mine's show. Not Bill Mick. I did yell at Bill Mick this morning, though, for the same thing. I was listening to another friend of mine's show, and he was interviewing a guest who was the founder and host of a particular group online, and he was soliciting members. And listening to him, it sounded good. It made sense, and I thought, well, I should go join that group. It's a group that's not unlike the original Tea Party back in 2009, and so I thought, well, this would be a good place for me to hang out. Only it turned out it's not. It has turned into, for lack of a better phrase, right-wing conspiracy central. And this morning, as I was contemplating all these things and trying to figure out, what am I realizing here? Where am I going? Someone posted an article from a particular show that I abhor because in all the years I've paid any attention at all to this fellow, he's never been right on anything. Not one. In fact, I did a whole show a year ago, 2 years ago, about the fact that this guy was completely making crap up. Talking about a U.S. submarine being torpedoed and sunk off Alaska. He scared the crap out of people, folks. I live near a submarine base. I'm telling you, people who don't recognize fake nonsense, BS, were scared. That's the irresponsible licentiousness that Jefferson was talking about. And then he has the audacity to say, send me money for my show. I got to get my show on air. I got to keep giving you this great information that I'm giving you that's completely false. Someone posted a link to one of his stories again today, dealing with the election, as you can probably guess. And it was complete nonsense. You can look at... You don't have to have the IQ of this rock to know that it was complete nonsense. All you got to do is think for yourself, but nobody is. Up comes from a side we like. It's saying what we want to hear. Therefore, it must be true. If that is going to be our reaction to media of which we approve, how will we hold the media accountable so that it is confined to the truth? So that we will correct its false reasonings and opinions, so that we will hear all the parties. And we, the people, will draw the line between the inestimable liberty of the press and its demoralizing licentiousness. You're hearing a lot of stuff out there, folks. Believe me, I am stunned in some ways. I knew it was bad. This week has seen me go into places on the advice of friends and compatriots who thought, well, Dave, you should see this. This guy knows what's going on. All you got to do is be able to think for yourself, and you can see it's nonsense. It's just wishful thinking. That's all it is. Moreover, it's bizarre wishful thinking. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion. There's nothing wrong with saying, well, I wish this would happen, or I think this might happen. But if it's not the truth, if it's not confined to the truth, is it really freedom of the press? Is it really supporting and protecting our liberties? Or is it just one side or the other trying to control things so that they can gain more power over you or them? I suspect that that's what it is. Just like a San Francisco supervisor, it's really no different, is it? It's just somebody who wants you to believe what they say so that they can control you.